All right. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ben Lerner.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me there, Aaron.
Hey, I'm excited. We all have an amazing guest on the line. Dr. Ben, why don't you just share with us some highlights, because there's so many things you're involved with. Just what you're doing right now, a little bit about you, your family, the kids, what you're doing, and what you like to do for fun.
For us, fun is working out. As my wife and I, that's our hobby. Triathlons, training. My kids, we were in the garage today for 30 minutes doing, an AMRAP for our fun. So we do fitness as a hobby. As far as what I'm involved in, I love to manufacture. So I like making products that really help people get healthier. While the world looks more towards traditional things like drugs to get healthier or other chemicals, we're always making, whether it's a supplement or some food or some nutrient that's going to produce better human health. So I'm really involved in manufacturing. I have a company called Vitalio Health where we actually test people. Currently, we're doing things like testing their antibodies against COVID-19. But more importantly, we're evaluating people's immune systems so they can be as healthy as possible. Everything I'm involved in, all the different companies are ultimately there to help people reach their potential. And right now to go out confidently knowing that they've got the immunity, they've got the strength to go on with their lives. So that's a lot of the focus today.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into this deep, that we want to give our listeners some real tactical advice on where we need to head. I mean, we're right in the middle of a mess right now with this COVID-19. And I know the way you look at it, the way I look at it is this is just, this is part of the system. These things are going to happen. We have to have confidence to build our health, recognize what it takes to build it. And I know you're going to share some amazing advice here. Let's just dive into this with, where do you think, and you see, I mean, you've been a chiropractor. How long have you been a chiropractor for, Dr. Ben?
Almost 30 years.
I knew you had me beat, but I didn't know if it was 3 or 4 years. So 4 years. So you've been around the block, many clinics, treating thousands of patients. At one point, you were treating over 12,000 patients a month in your 5 clinics. Is that correct, or more?
About 15,000 people a month in 5 clinics. Yes.
So the experience that we're going to learn today, and the advice, you have seen it at very high levels. So we're going to gather some great information. Where do you see a problem? I mean, we're facing a problem that people are living in fear. And it's not just with this, it's for the 30 years you've been in practice and all the businesses you've run, people are running from fear. Where's a problem that we need to identify so we can start moving away?
Yeah, I mean, it's only slightly more different. Certainly this is a very transferable problem we are dealing with right now with this particular virus. But if you look at every year how many people die from a heart attack, or every year how many people die from the flu, or every year how many people die from a variety of different infections or conditions like cancer, it's been very scary. So I grew up in a family where my dad died very young. My mom had a stroke very young. I'm named after my grandfather, who I never met. My kids never met my dad. So I've known how scary disease was for my entire life. And so I've always known that we have to really be very vigilant and very diligent in building up our health and our immunity to make sure that we're not going to die from a lot of things. And so now I think it's just come to the forefront that if we are walking around with weakened systems, we are more susceptible to something that's been very apparent in the media here lately, and that we better start thinking about what we can do to get stronger more urgently, because otherwise it'll be hard to ever get back to real living.
I know your dad died young, so did mine, of heart disease. And I remember, and it was probably something similar to you. I drew a line in the sand that moment, and I said, this is not going to happen to me. I didn't understand chiropractic care. I didn't understand the nerve system, but I knew that I could win at this. I knew I could do this. Does our body, I mean, for the listeners out there, I mean, they're living in fear, I think, because they just don't believe their body has the ability to heal, or they've been sick too long, or it runs in the family, the genetics, just like what you were talking about. do we have the ability to regenerate? Do we have the ability to start moving out of our genetic traits into something much more viable, much more in a health realm, that we can beat this and then transfer this back to our kids?
We actually have built a gene testing platform. We have our own DNA testing site. And I think I might go on record as saying I was the youngest person in history to know what the term genetics meant. Because when I was 3 years old, I was visiting, yet another dying relative in the hospital, and some aunt or somebody said, yeah, this is kind of how it goes for your family. We have bad genetics. So I was 3 years old being told, yeah, you're doomed. You've got bad genetics. And that my whole life, I remember being 8 years old and my mom saying, yeah, the people in your family, in our family, they just get fat. And by the time you're 30, you'll be fat. Wow. And so that was, because it's bad genetics. and all of a sudden this word comes out, once I'm now studying actual health, and I had done the same thing as you. I drew a line in the sand and said, not if I can help it. I'm not going to end up like everybody else. And I heard of this word epigenetics, that you could actually overcome your genetics by a change in lifestyle and express really good health instead of expressing disease. So there are many, many studies that show that just by a simple dietary change, you can turn off hundreds of pro-cancer genes and turn on hundreds of anti-cancer genes just by a dietary change. Never mind, you actually started getting adjusted, you started exercising, getting proper supplementation. Imagine the thousands of positive genes you'll begin expressing if you really address your health, as well as the thousands of anti-health genes that you turn off by just taking right action, going to somebody like you, getting on a plan.
So listeners, if you can put that information on pen, put it up on your wall, you can reverse this. You do not have to become like your parents, like your grandparents. So when you first if you can first believe that, then you have some action steps. And before we get into action steps, I see Dr. Ben doing fitness stunts on his Facebook page, and I try to match them. I come close, but I can't match them. But I'm doing my best. I'm gonna keep at you. I'm gonna keep on your tail. But what are some of the so the listeners can understand, you are an amazingly healthy, fit guy, come from a family that wasn't. You changed it. What are some highlights of your fitness? And tell them how old you are, first of all, and then tell them maybe in the last few years what you've done.
Well, I do watch you on Facebook and make sure that I stay just ahead of you. So you are pushing me because we're around the same age. I'm 53. And so, I really make sure that I'm constantly progressing. I actually, when I was in my 20s, just starting off in chiropractic, I had this patient, Ron. And when Ron was 52, he had a heart attack and was the first person in his family to survive the heart attack. So he decided, kind of like you said, I'm drawing a line in the sand. And he said, I'm going to get healthier and more fit every year the rest of my life. So when Ron was my patient, he was in his 90s. And every year on his birthday, Ron would set a new fitness record. And so we'd all go to the gym, and Ron would stack up, 800 pounds in the leg press, or he'd put 250 on the bench press, or he'd pick up, 70-pound dumbbells and curl them. And every year he was beating whatever he had done the year before. I thought, man, I want to be like Ron. And now at 53, that's become more of a reality. So like recently I set my inverted push-up record. I did 40.
Wow.
Last year I wanted to be able to clap behind my back when I did a pull-up. If you remember that one, you might have seen that on video.
Sick.
40, this was 40 inverted push-ups this year. When I first got into chiropractic, I'd hurt my back deadlifting. And so I was deadlifting at the time 300 and then stopped deadlifting. So this year at 53, I went and deadlifted 305 pounds to beat, because I was 18. I was doing a deadlift at 300 when I hurt my back at 18. And now at 53, I did 305. So what I really am just proving to myself and everybody else is that you can keep getting healthier. Age is a myth. And that if you take care of yourself, it doesn't have to be like it was for your parents or grandparents or great-great-grandparents. You have a lot to say about your future.
Absolutely. And I love that how he was like the Jack LaLanne in your area then. He was setting the bar and he kept going for it. If we don't set the bar and we don't put numbers out there and achieve them and at least strive for them, we slip into this mess of mediocrity, if even that, and we become like everyone else. And every time I see you do something, I'm like, see, you're a year younger than me. That's why. I won't use an excuse because I yell at my patients all the time. But my son-in-law, he's amazingly fit. He said, I think I'm going to try doing 300 pull-ups one day in an hour. And I said, you'll be able to do it. So it clicked in my head. So one day I said, I'm going to do that. So I did 300. When I got to 300, I'm like, I'm doing 301 just to say I did 301. Now you got to go try it. So that kind of stuff drives you.
I'm going to go do 302 pull-ups right now, right after this.
And you're going to do it in 50 minutes or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I know.
59 minutes.
So when we look at this challenge we have in healthcare, I mean, from the genetic testing, chiropractic, nutrition, what is the biggest challenge we have, and where do we start? How do we start implementing a process towards that? Because there's going to be people who've never heard any of this, and they're trying to get moving for the first time, and there's people that have done genetic testing. But from a global point, somebody looks at that and says, what's the most important thing to start going after and the biggest bang for the buck?
Well, when it comes to who lives and who dies from COVID, just as an example, because we've been looking at inflammation for years, and you and I have been looking at anti-inflammatory eating for decades. And so COVID, they found in the first studies that came out of China that got published in Lancet, that the people who can control inflammation, they go through a normal immune arc. They get the virus, inflammation kicks in, attacks the virus, inflammation comes back to normal, and you could be fine within as little as 7 or 8 days. And in fact, a lot of people never have a symptom. More than half the people that get this thing don't get a symptom. So that's normal inflammation. And a lot of that's controlled by diet. So when you look at IL-6, IL-1 beta, the key inflammatory markers that you deal with when you're talking about COVID, the data shows us, the research shows you can reduce concentrations of IL-1 beta, which is what shuts your lungs down. You can reduce IL-6 inflammatory marker levels by anti-inflammatory eating, which is as simple as, you're watching it's sugars and grains, you're keeping those to a minimum or eliminating them, and you're upping like your omega-3 fats. So that's your fish oils, or your better fats like your avocado, flaxseed, olive oil. So if you just did one simple thing and you had low glycemic eating, where you eliminated a lot of the grains and sugars, increased the good fats, a lot of great plant-based stuff, low glycemic fruits, lots of vegetables, at least set that as a base of a more Mediterranean style of eating, you immediately start to get inflammation under control. And every disease, so we're thinking about COVID now, but you and I know we've talked about it relative to autoimmune disease, whether it was heart disease or cancer, pain in the joints, aging, whatever it was. I mean, you and I talk about all these great exploits in fitness. I just have to go eat a cheeseburger and French fries, and my shoulder feels like, I just got hit by a truck, because I'll increase all this inflammation, and every old injury I've got starts hurting again.
Yeah, and when we look at the food platform, let's say, nutrition can't be made up with supplements. And I think a lot of people will say, well, I'll just take an extra vitamin from GNC or Walmart or wherever. And we know that we don't have to get into that, but we can't make this up through nutrition. Through supplements. We have to start with a foundation, and the healthy, fast, anti-inflammatory foods is universal across the board. That affects every disease, correct?
Yeah, it's, the bottom line is, every year they look at the diets, and every year it's the Mediterranean diet that wins. And it's pretty simple, so that diet is loaded with nutrition that is packed with vitamins and minerals and all of your co-vitamins and co-minerals and all these different elements you need, like your good fats, because the diet is based out of a lot of plants, a lot of fish, very little sugar or red meat or anything like that. And so, it's pretty simple. Is your food dense with good nutrition? When they looked at why old people die, so the studies on why older people die from COVID, It's simply that their nutrient levels are so diminished naturally over time as you age. So, I was reading an article today even on melatonin, which is one of the nutrients they said really can help fight virus infections like COVID. And when you age, your melatonin drops way down. So we know that at any age, the important thing is getting those nutrients up, and it starts with just the nutrients in the food. And then obviously you could supplement. They call it a supplement for a reason. It's supposed to supplement what you're eating in your food. It's not there to replace it.
So in a minute, I want to ask you about your genetic testing and immune function. But before we jump into that, there's always been a lot of controversy, a lot of questions regarding chiropractic care. Why chiropractic care for the immune system? I continually put this stuff out there, and there's still a lot of question. People have never heard of it. Being a chiropractor for 30 years, you are a fitness expert, nutrition expert, business expert, and you started all this with chiropractic. Why is chiropractic care so vital for overall health and immune function?
And I've got my degrees in chiropractic and I've got my bachelor's in nutrition. But if you stuck me on a deserted island and said, would you want me to have good nutrition and my supplements or a chiropractor? I'm going to take the chiropractor every time. Because I know the impact that makes cannot be touched by just something you would swallow, because it just gets to the core of how your body functions, which is through the nervous system. But it doesn't have to just be a philosophy or something I'm saying. There's a lot of research. I've posted dozens and dozens of articles where there are more than a dozen pieces of research showing chiropractic's effectiveness on the immune system, including when we talk about this particular virus, for example. When you and I were back in school, they did the study on AIDS patients. And with AIDS patients, your CD4 levels, which is a major part of your immune system, those levels drop way off when you have AIDS. Well, they took one group and got them adjusted, and one group didn't get adjusted. And over time, there was over a 50% swing in elevated CD4 levels, which is a good thing for the people getting adjusted. I mean, over 50% difference in those people. So direct indication as to the ability of the body to fight a virus while under chiropractic care versus not under chiropractic care. And a recent study too, that when you get adjusted, it cranks up your IL-2, your interleukin-2, which is the foundational first part of the cascade of events that occur. It's a domino that falls that leads to the immunoglobulins that we're all talking about right now. So we know we need that IgG memory antibody against COVID if we're going to have any immunity moving forward. And now we know that that ability to increase those antibodies or even create those antibodies is generated by the nervous system. And you can see it, that ability ramp way up right after an adjustment.
Yeah, that's amazing research. And it's so interesting when I talk about this or I talk to patients, doctors, they've never heard of this stuff. So it is real. It is there. We have to become aware of it and begin to, and when you hear these podcasts like this, you have to start doing your own research, doing your own thinking. And I know Dr. Ben and myself, when we look at the body that God created, we both believe it can heal, it can regenerate, but you and I have to do our part to assist in that. So your genetic testing, this is quite interesting. I for one have not gotten into this yet. I've looked into it and I just haven't gone down that path yet. Very interesting science. Can you explain what you're doing with this and how listeners can maybe start using this as a tool, maybe a more viable tool than just going to get their blood work, seeing if their sugars are up, or seeing if their blood pressure's up? What can this give us, and what can this help us with?
Yeah, again, as the Guinness Book of World Records holder for youngest person to ever know what genetics meant at the age of 3, it has been fascinating to dive into it, because it's not like genetics are nothing. They do set you up with a predisposition to certain conditions. But if you do the testing, if it's the right kind of testing, you become empowered with information. So for example, I mentioned my family, unfortunately, is nothing but a history of strokes and heart attacks and all these types of conditions. And for us, we have an ApoE4 gene. So that gene, what happens is we don't do well with saturated fats. Those people they found have higher incidence of heart disease, stroke, and Alzheimer's. So I was on a keto diet. So I was eating lots of saturated fat. And for a lot of people, that's not an issue. But in my family, that's something to pay attention to. Don't eat a lot of saturated fat. And so for us, the Mediterranean diet with less saturated fat became really important. We mentioned IL-6 is really critical in relationship to your immune system. It's both a pro-inflammatory cytokine and an anti-inflammatory cytokine. So you got to balance it out. Well, there's a gene for IL-6. If you're not making certain enzymes to manage IL-6 levels, you may have more of a tendency to have bad inflammation, for that inflammation to be out of control and be more prone to an infection by COVID going badly. So knowing what's going on in your genes it's never bad news. It's always empowering news. It tells you the direction you need to take, tells you what your predispositions are. You get to see your levels of risk, and then you can make good life choices so that you are epigenetically overcoming what other people once believed you were doomed to suffer from.
So based on our history, our family history, where we come from, and what kind of foods we've eaten for years, what country we've came from, I guess, the genetic testing will guide us to allow us to choose even healthy foods that may be healthier for us compared to some healthy foods may go again, counteract a certain body type. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So there are things, and there's other testing too, like we do food sensitivity testing with our gene testing often. And so you'll find some people are now sensitive, in a negative way to something that's normally considered healthy. Like in my food sensitivity testing, it was found that almonds are bad for me. I create antibodies against almonds. So that's considered generally a healthy food, but just not for me. Same thing with a keto diet. That's generally a healthy diet, even when there's red meat in it and saturated fats. But for some people, where we're saying coconut oil is a healthy food, for others, they'd have to really moderate their use because they've got certain genes that don't allow them to break down saturated fats really well. And coconut oil is predominantly a saturated fat. So, it's important to know your genetics to give yourself your best chance with, all areas of health.
Well, this explains when we look at a keto diet, for example, very hot diet, people get on the keto, they lose 50 pounds in 10 days. They are shredded. There's 0% body fat. You see these incredible stories like, wow, I'm going to go keto. And it was interesting when this keto was out years ago, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start eating more fats. And I always eat fats, but I'm going to concentrate and try to eat more. Every time I do, and I've never had this genetic testing, I'm going to do this and find out to guide me. I've had some, but not yours, not to this level. Every time I would eat more fats, I started feeling bad. I felt tired. I felt sluggish. I didn't feel energized. And then I would go back to eating, put some more fruit back in my diet. And immediately I would start to gain more strength, gain more energy, clarity in my mind. And it just baffled me. And I knew that there was something here to it. So I just didn't have the scientific test. I was kind of doing it trial and error. So the listeners out there that are looking at keto and they want to lose weight, they want to regain their weight, their life, their energy, their joints hurt. They see their neighbor Mary do keto, so they're just going to jump on keto. They see somebody do paleo and CrossFit, and they're trying it, and they're getting hurt every week. This test is in particular will guide them to have a good foundational starting point that will actually identify the needs of their body instead of just trying to, like what I'm doing is just picking and choosing and finding out what's best. That would save a lot of time for them, correct?
Yeah, and you've done it well too. I mean, people should be more intuitive to what foods they're responding well to, which foods they aren't, which types of diets may work well for them versus just the fact that their next door neighbor lost weight on it. All of us need to be paying attention like that. But if you do a genetic test, you can get to the bottom of it really quick. And it also tells you a lot of other things. For example, if you're a poor methylator, you would know you got to keep your B vitamins up. If you've got high CRP, you would know you need to keep your omega-3 levels up because you've got to make sure you're more prone to go in the anti-inflammatory direction versus the pro-inflammatory direction. So there's a lot of other things it gives you the secrets to, so that you can make sure you're overcoming any bad genetics and expressing only good genetics.
So let me ask you this. Let's say as a parent, would your kids pick up the very similar diet that you have, or would they need to be tested as well? Because obviously there's two parents,
Yeah.
sets of genes coming in from different families. How do we manage our children at that point as well? Because we want to create healthy future generations. I don't want to see this fear in our society anymore. And we've got to look at this globally as a family too and say, look, we implement this to get healthy and exercise, but my kids too, they're out in my barn. I have a fitness area in my barn. My kids are working out together and running and lifting weights, and we still play rugby. So my kids are playing rugby with me. My son just turned 16 and he went out to play rugby, and they look at me and they're like, "Hey, Gramps." I'm like, "Well, Gramps is still going to outrun you. So call me whatever you like." But it's really cool that we've used these family tools, these health tools as a family, and that's what we should be doing. We don't just pick them for ourselves and let our kids eat McDonald's, let our kids sit and play video games all day. Does the genetic testing apply to them, and what do we need to look at?
Yeah, and first, what you said is really profound, because it's not so much genes as it is culture. We tend to live the same way our parents lived, so we tend to step on the same genetic landmines that our parents stepped on. And so that's the fact that you guys have a healthy culture. Your kids are going to express maximum health because they're coming from a healthy family. And that's really important for parents to realize, that the diet we have is the diet the kids will tend to have, as well as the fact that if it's the wrong diet, it's expressing bad genes in the children and setting them down a poor course. To your question about different genes, so siblings will tend to have very similar genes because their parents are the same. So they're getting the same X and Y chromosomes there from mom and dad. Then, of course, twins have identical. If they're identical twins, they've got identical genes. But if we get now with a wife or husband that's from a separate set of parents, we're going to get a separate mix of genes. So we would have to check the kids individually to see where their genetics compare to our genetics.
That's pretty cool. And I was just thinking, and we're gonna tie in and try to implement like 3 powerful things that we can leave here today with. What can they do? What can they learn? I looked at the Pittsburgh stats, and my dad was one of them. Heart disease is higher in Pittsburgh, about 69% higher than the national average. And we're 77% higher in cancer rates. And this is nothing new. I mean, we know that heart disease and cancer are everywhere. And we want to change this. And we have to begin thinking different, implementing different, and implementing as a family. When we were talking about family and culture, I thought, I have one on you, Dr. Ben. And I don't know if you can beat me on this now. And maybe when my daughter was at Life, and that's the chiropractic college that Dr. Ben and I went, and you were a rugby guy for a while.
Yeah.
I played rugby there. When my daughter was playing rugby there, and they called me and said, "Hey, we want to interview you because you're the first father-daughter rugby combination ever in history in the United States at one college." And I thought, that's so cool. So they interviewed us, but they never published it. So I don't have it on paper, but I thought that's pretty cool. So I don't know if you could beat me there. I might catch it.
I don't think my daughter's going to play rugby.
So 3 massive steps. What's first step they can implement? People out there can implement that's going to be profound to their life.
Yeah, I think controlling inflammation, again, especially right now, because when we look at who lives and dies from this particular infection, and even just like a lot of leading scientists are saying, it's really not the virus. It's the same thing we've had an issue with for years, which is your body managing inflammation? So you've got to really dig in. And how do I manage inflammation? And again, that's the grains, the sugars, the bad fats, chemicals, the medications we're taking. These things really raise inflammation. Being subluxated, not seeing a chiropractor, that really creates a lot of inflammation versus, your plants, versus your good fats, versus being fit, getting adjusted. This is the way to live an anti-inflammatory type of lifestyle. Get rest, take certain supplements that will help. You've got to win the war against inflammation, whether it's COVID time or not. it's been killing people more than any other problem forever.
Yeah, and when you're listening to this, you have to be careful what you Google, but if you do your research and your due diligence, you'll start finding, we're going to have Dr. Ben's resources on here. He's written many books. His books I've read, I've studied. And when you get a book like Dr. Ben's and you dive into it, don't just read it casually. You read it with a highlighter and pen. You take notes and then you implement. And then as that becomes part of your lifestyle, you don't have to learn it again because it's part of your lifestyle. Then you read some more and implement. If you do this, you can use his books as study guides, learn how to eat healthy. You'll start to become less inflamed and your body will just explode with health. I remember this is going on my 6th year when I wrecked my bike and broke my scapula. The pain was unbearable. I gained about 10 pounds in a week and I wasn't even eating much. It was just inflammation. And then I started to become depressed and my moods were shifting. So I knew that through chiropractic care, healthy eating, healthy exercise, trusting in God and God's system, drinking lots of water, I knew I would heal, and I healed amazingly fast. But it was the inflammation that once I got it under control, my body started to heal. What would be number 2?
No, it's definitely, I mean, you and I are both fitness fanatics. One of the things that they're seeing across the board, once again, just to keep it relevant to COVID right now, is that they're seeing that people that are overweight, that's a comorbidity. If you're overweight, you have a far greater risk of dying from this than somebody who isn't. So it's really about being fit, body composition, and the ability to manage inflammation again. Being overweight makes you more inflamed, as well as it makes you less able to absorb and sustain healthy vitamin D levels, because vitamin D is another big factor when it comes to immunity and when it comes to this situation we're in right now. So we've got to figure out some sort of fitness program that you can stick to, because otherwise, every condition, once again, this isn't new, every condition is worsened by poor body composition.
This is amazing information, folks. And I pray that you're not just listening, but understanding this is advice from one of the top doctors in the world. Take it and start to move in this direction. It will change your life. Number 3.
Yeah, of course, all throughout this, you and I have shared our families and the focus we have on wellness in our families. And that's for both of us, that's a motivator. My dad and your dad died very young. I want to be here for my family. So when I'm going out to do those 302 pull-ups today, I'm going to be thinking about, on 240, when it starts to get really hard, I'm going up and down each time for my kids. This is to keep me at a peak of health for my family. But the third one is, getting tested. We really don't know where we are in terms of our DNA, our inflammation, vitamin D levels, what foods we're sensitive to or not sensitive to. So I'm a real fanatic about being tested, because a lot of the decisions I make are informed decisions based on the test results that have come back. And there are issues that I didn't know about, things that I'm correcting, or ways I've changed my diet or lifestyle based on real data about my body, or data that my wife has about her body, or that we have about our kids' bodies. So we are leading a very specific lifestyle, very intentional when it comes to being healthy, and again, not triggering some genetic landmine.
When people listening may say, "Wow, that seems hard." I hear this a lot. You love exercising, doc. I'm like, I really don't love exercising. I love how I feel. But work is, if you're coming in and you've seen patients in wheelchairs, walkers, canes, limping, crawling, laying on the table, hardly able to get up, that's a lot of work. And if you implement what Dr. Ben is saying, it's work, but you get rewarded from it. You get to run and play with your kids. Like when we play kickball and wiffle ball in the backyard, I want to win. I'm not going to let them win. I keep on going. And I think you're going to do the pull-ups, not for your kids. You're going to do it just to beat me, but that's all right. Keep going.
Whatever motivator I can use.
And that's what it is. That's a great point, because whatever motivates you to stay healthy, the benefits, I wish my dad was here. I'm sure you as well. My dad wasn't able to even play catch with me in the backyard because his heart was so weak he couldn't walk up the hill. So I would have loved that. So I'm taking it to a level, and I want to say, not only do I want to play with my kids, but I want to be able to outdo them as long as I can. And we're both in our 50s. We got 50 years until we hit 100. So we have a long way to go. There's no backing down now. All right. I so appreciate you being here and doing this with us today. And we're going to have all your resources, your books, everything on our page. Listeners, check it out, download, buy the books. They've transformed my life, and they'll keep pushing you in that direction. As we end, any fun, crazy things coming up in the future besides, well, you can add in some fitness things, but anything fun that you're heading towards?
For me, it's a lot about my kids' health, so it's really just been a blast for me to watch, my kids do burpee contests and pull-up contests. And my daughter at 17 wanted to, do her first 10K. And, it is really neat to watch what happens when you have a healthy household and watch the kids exceed you. When you said keeping up with the kids, I can't run with my 13-year-old son anymore. He's running a 5:20 mile now.
I saw that.
I tell him I'll meet you at home. So that the next frontier is just watching them blow this world out of the water.
It is so cool because it's not about running a 5-minute mile. It's about the journey to be healthy, and his journey, just like your other kids, they may do different things, but in the end, folks, if you work on your health, if you start studying your health, studying what you need to eat, getting tested, we'll have the links to this test. So you can get a test like this, find out exactly what is best for you. You are going to start, you're going to put out, I always tell patients, you're going to put out money one way or another. You're going to put it into a new refrigerator or a new set of tires, or you're going to buy a set of shoes to run with. I always put my fitness level at the top. I always put things first, because I want my health to be around. If my health is there, I can continue serving not only God, but serving my family, serving the community. And I want to be here for 120 years. So any last parting advice, some words of wisdom?
No, agreed. I think it may sound hard, like you said. I know for a lot of people, it just sounds like we're piling it on, but it is a lot better than being sick. So as two guys that come from dads that left the world too early, I would have loved for my dad to say, rather than baseball games and Christmas presents and just making sure that we go out to dinner every Friday night, I'm going to take that money and that time and invest it in my health. And I would have said, Dad, absolutely, I'd rather have you around than have that bike at Christmas or go out to dinner on Friday. Because, as somebody who's now had to live without his dad for the last 25 years, I wish he had listened to a show like this and jumped into his health.
Yes, and that's the goal, is to reach others before it becomes a crisis and make changes. But it's up to you, listeners, to start implementing. And we appreciate you listening to our show. Share this, send it to your friends and family, and let's make Pittsburgh the healthiest city in America. We can make this a global event that every city is striving to become healthier. Dr. Ben, thank you so much for being on our show. I greatly appreciate you.
Great to be here.